Welcome back to More Than Gardening. Today's video is all about 2025 garden planning, and I'm going to give you an overview of how my garden's going to look this year, what I'm growing, where I'm growing it, what I'm adding on to my garden, what I'm doing differently, and just everything that I plan on doing this year. I hope this video helps you if you're a new gardener and you're looking for where to start, how to start, what to grow. If you're like, what seeds do I buy? When do I start them? How do I know when to start them? I hope this video gives you everything you need to just start your first garden. This is just gonna set the stage for the 2025 garden season. I plan on filming a lot more content here on YouTube throughout my gardening season. I'm gonna film all of my seeds starting. Onions start next week. March will be peppers. April will be tomatoes and broccoli and a lot of different things I'm growing this year. And since I want to take you along through all of that, I figured we needed this first video just to set the stage, give an overview, and talk through the garden as a whole. If you are new here, my name is Sam. I live in Michigan, Zone 6A. Throughout this video, you're gonna hear me talk a lot about my last frost date and my first frost date. Frost dates are basically like an average estimate for when the temperature is gonna drop below freezing and you're gonna have a frost. And a lot of vegetables, when you buy the seed packets, it's gonna say, like these onions, for example, it'll say to start them before frost or put them in the ground X amount of weeks before your last frost. And then other vegetables, say like tomatoes that I have here, these ones will say to plant out after your last frost or to start inside X amount of weeks before your last frost. So you really need to know those two dates. All you have to do is just literally go online. You can go to Google, Farmer's Almanac, whatever site, and just be like, what are my frost dates? And you'll type in your zip code and you'll get it. Frost dates really help you determine when to start seeds, when to plant seeds outside, and just really it's key for timing your garden overall. Before I get too in the weeds on what I'm growing, I want to just go over my garden space as a whole and then give some advice on if you're starting your garden new, how I recommend you do that. So my garden today has one raised bed that I call the shed bed. So if you hear me refer to that, it's just this raised bed that's attached to a shed on our property. Our house came with this raised bed before, and this is the raised bed I started my first ever garden in. I was able to be successful with sunflowers and zucchini in it last year. So we'll be using it again for zucchini, sunflowers, and I'm going to try broccoli in there as well. And then the main garden, which was all new last year, is 7 wood 8x4 raised beds, 1 metal 4x3 Birdie's raised bed from Epic Gardening. I have trellises that connect the, what I call like the back 4 wooden raised beds. And then I have grow bags that I usually line along a fence. We are going to be adding 4 new 8x4 wood raised beds this season to expand our growing area. And then we're going to add another cattle panel trellis connecting those 2 back beds together. I like to put my cattle panel trellises on the back side of my garden because that's the east side. That way, as the sun is going over the garden, the trellises don't cast a shadow on the other beds. If you want to see how we built any of these wood raised beds or how we built the cattle panel trellises, I do have videos on my YouTube channel and I will link them in the description of this video. I like to use raised beds because I have full control over the soil and the soil warms up a little bit faster in the spring. I can get things planted a little faster. The raised beds are also just easier on my back to work in. I think they look neat and tidy. And that's just what I prefer, but you can also grow in ground. If you're a new gardener, here's my recommendation on what to buy, what to get, what to grow in. Grow bags are a no-brainer. They are super, super easy. I love the lined ones from Epic Gardening. I'll link them in the description. They are sturdy, they hold up. I bought Amazon ones that were super cheap my first year and they just totally fell apart after the first year. These ones from Epic, they're like a good quality product. I absolutely love these grow bags. And they're really good for beginners because you can move it around. So if you don't know exactly where you want your garden to be because you don't know where you get the best sun, you can put the grow bag in one spot. And then if your plant isn't doing as well and you're noticing it's not getting sun, you can move it to another spot. And that will help you determine maybe where on your property you want to build a bigger garden that next year or years down the road. If you want to go a step further than grow bags, I recommend raised beds. You can build raised beds, which we did. You can buy wooden raised beds. Epic Gardening has a nice cedar one. They also have these metal raised beds. I have one of these. I absolutely love it. I built this in like 30 minutes all by myself. So if you want a metal one or you want a raised bed, but you don't want the big commitment of building one, I recommend this one. Again, all this will be linked in the description for you, but I would probably get 2 raised beds and like a handful of grow bags and just play around with those my first season. For soil, I fill my raised beds with homemade compost. We make a ton of homemade compost here on our property. We just collect kitchen scraps. We put them in a bucket in our garage. As a bucket fills, we dump them into our compost. My husband manages the compost mostly, thank goodness, because I don't really like the smell of it. And he just will drop all the scraps in there. He does the grass clippings. He does the leaves around the house. Like any organic material gets dumped in these compost bins. They get mixed, they get watered, and then we use that to add to our raised beds. I also ordered a ton of soil from a local landscaper last season. I got a 50-50 mix of topsoil and compost. I had it sifted and layered in the truck. That way, when it dropped for us, it was all mixed together nicely. And then we just hauled that to our backyard and loaded up our raised beds. We also put a ton of like tree branches and leaves and cardboard and a ton of other organic material in the raised beds to take up space. It was expensive, so I do recommend you kind of like build up that base of the raised bed with logs or something else just to save on room. If your garden isn't big enough to make a big delivery from a landscaper worth it, I would just get organic potting soil or organic raised bed soil from a hardware store or a nursery. You can also buy compost at like a hardware store or nursery. Mix that all together, add a little bit of slow release granular fertilizer to it, and load up your raised beds and your grow bags, and you're gonna be just fine. This year, we are actually gonna add 3 or 4 raspberry bushes. We have this like section along one of our fence lines that has wild onions and wild blackberries right now, but we don't get anything from those, and they're kind of ugly and we just don't like them. So we're gonna put raspberry bushes there, and we're also gonna add 2 peach trees. We really, really want fruit trees. Apples seem like impossible. Everybody I talk to says they're so hard. I've heard peach trees are easier, so that's what we're gonna do. And that's what we're adding to this year's garden in terms of growing and growing space. All of the seeds I'm growing, I will link in the description of this video. I get 90% of my seeds from Epic Gardening. They own Botanical Interest, and if I buy them on the Epic Gardening site, I get to use my discount code, which is More Than Gardening 5, and you can use it too. And I like saving money, so that's part of the reason I shop through them. Also, they supported my channel pretty early on, and I like to then purchase from them and support them back. I just think that's a nice relationship. So buy your seeds wherever you want though. Botanical Interest is also sold at a lot of nurseries. Another reason I like them is the nursery in my town sells them, so if I don't have time to order them and I need something in a pinch, I can run up against those. To give you like a high level, the main crops I grow are tomatoes, peppers, onions, squash, cantaloupe, carrots, spinach, kale, green beans, a lot of herbs, tomatillos, and flowers. So I'm not gonna get into like a ton of detail about each variety in this video because I will talk about all of those when I start those seeds later on in the season. But again, I'll link them below. So if you wanna like grow the same things as me, you can totally do that. Since I'm in Michigan and I have a shorter growing season, my last frost is like the 2nd week of May and my first frost is usually about the 1st or 2nd week of October. That's like a pretty short season compared to like people that live in a warm climate. So I like to get a head start, and I start almost all of my seeds inside. I get them to like a nice like seedling stage, a nice age, and then I plant them out in the garden. So behind me here, you're gonna see these are the shelves and grow lights that I use to start all my seeds. I will link this also in the description if you want to get it. These are great because the shelves, you can change the height, you can change the height of the light. So as the plant is growing, you can have the light really close to it. And then as they grow taller, you can move the lights and actually move the physical shelves to make even more room. Start them in 6-cell trays from Epic Gardening, and then those I put on 10-20 trays by Epic Gardening. I really like those trays because they're a rigid plastic. They have slits on the side. That way, when you put the 6-cell trays in those 10-20 trays, you can bottom water, and which means you can just put water in the bottom of that tray, and then those 6 cells will like suck up the water, which is really, really nice for a seedling because if you're watering from below, the seedling, the roots have to like work to get down to the water, and it just builds like a stronger root system and a stronger plant versus watering on top. If you don't want to manage seeds inside, you don't want to buy all this equipment, you can just buy a seedling from a nursery. My first year got all of my starter plants like peppers and tomatoes from a local nursery. You want to get one that is like about yay height, like 6 inches tall. You want it to have a thick stem, and you want it to, if it's a pepper, you want to look for like early branching. You don't need to buy like a tomato plant that is fully grown with tomatoes already on it. I mean, you can, but those are so overpriced. You're never gonna get the yield of the tomatoes that in order to make up the cost of what you spent it on. But nurseries are great. I think if you don't want to start your own seeds and you have a short growing season like me, hit up your local nursery, get some plants, and then just transplant them into the grow bags, the raised beds, or however you're growing them. Now, if you do want to start seeds inside, what I'm looking at right now, and I'm going to show you, I created this garden planner last year, and I use it to plan out pretty much my entire season. So I have like the crop category over here, the number of plants I'm growing, plant spacing guidelines, my location, I have all my raised beds numbered, whether I'm going to sow it inside, so starting the seed inside, or I'm going to directly sow it outside, timing before my last frost. So for example, like my cayenne pepper, I'm going to start my seeds inside 8 to 10 weeks before my last frost. This is when I'm planting it outside, so after my last frost, and then I go over here, and these are my dates. So in March, this is when I'm starting it inside, or sow inside SI. Over here is when I'm planting it outside. This green bar is when my average last frost is. And then in some of these, I write when I should be starting to harvest. I don't have the harvest for all of them because I think it's very, very dependent on how early you want to harvest some things, because sometimes you can kind of let things go and harvest later. Like cilantro here, I don't have a harvest in here because you can kind of harvest at any stage. This is what I use to plan out everything I'm growing. I'll link this in the description. It's really helpful for me. There's a little version over here if you want to do it, and you can write in your own plan. And I've got some data on companion planting, a key, and a start here. So that's what I use to plan my garden. It's kind of what I'm looking at throughout this video because I would kind of go insane without it. All right, so now what I'm growing this year. Starting on the shed bed, that is going to be broccoli in the spring. I'll start the seeds inside, I'll plant them out April, and then by about June, I should be harvesting the broccoli. After I harvest my broccoli, I'm gonna put zucchini and sunflowers into that bed. Next is the first 2 raised beds will be onions. I am doing red onions, which these are an intermediate day variety, so I'll get a lot more into detail in my next video about onions because that's when I'm gonna be seed starting them, but high level with onions, there's 3 categories of onions you can buy: long day, intermediate day, and short day, and that is based on the length of your day, which contributes to how your onions bulb, because they need a certain amount of hours a day to properly bulb based on variety. Start them like 14-ish weeks before my average last frost date. Just want a little bit more time, and that seems to work well for me. It seems to work well with a lot of people that live kind of around the zone that I'm in. The next 5 beds will all be tomatoes. First, there's gonna be 3 beds of Roma tomatoes. I am doing the Bush Roma Supremos from Botanical Interest, doing 8 plants per bed, so 24 Romas. If you followed my garden last year, you'll know how densely I planted my tomatoes last year. I did like 15 per 8x4 raised bed. I spaced them out like 18 inches on diagonally dimensioned. I did that because I just wanted to see what happened. People are so passionate about plant spacing with tomatoes, and I thought, let me just plant really dense. And the worst thing that will happen is per plant, I'll get a smaller yield, but I'll have so many plants that it will make up for not having a lot per plant. And I just needed to know for myself. So I planted them really densely. I learned my lesson quick. Didn't get a super great yield. So this season, I'm going to spread out my tomatoes. I'm going to do 8 to 10 per bed. The Romas, I'm going to do 8 per bed. My slicers, which are my Cherokee purples, and my beefsteaks will be 8 per bed. I'll do 10 San Marzanos in one of the beds. For canning, if you're trying to get into preserving, I recommend Romas and San Marzanos. They're meatier, they're less watery, they're less juicy. They're really great for canning. If you want slicing tomatoes, I recommend beefsteaks or Cherokee purples. Then with my tomatoes, I do a lot of companion planting with marigolds and basil. One of the biggest questions I get is pest control. I had close to no pest damage on my tomato plants this past year. The only thing I dealt with was hornworms, but that's it's kind of inevitable if you're gonna grow tomatoes. And I don't think they're that big of a deal because they're so big. You can just pick them off. And then if you have chickens, feed them to your chickens. I don't have chickens, so I kill them. Or some people say you should move them off your property somewhere else and keep them alive. Maybe I'll be better this year, but last year I squished them. But I plant marigolds around my tomatoes. They give off a stench that bugs don't like. and the bugs will stay away. Also, basil is a really, really strong smell that like kind of gets rid of the pest. I didn't have any issues with my tomato plants because I planted marigolds and basil along the entire border of my tomato plants. But other than that, like I don't do anything for pest control. I'm in my garden every single day. So if I see a pest, I'll just pick it off and kill it and get rid of it. Japanese beetles, you can pick off, put in a jar that you mix warm soapy water with, just drop it in there. It'll die. And then keep like picking them off and like build up that jar, and then don't empty the jar out like in the trash or anything. Like leave the jar outside because the other beetles will smell that like the beetles are dead, and they're not going to want to be there because they're going to think that they're going to die too. I don't want to spray anything on my garden. I want things to be organic and clean and as healthy as possible. And if you spray on your garden, like you're also disturbing like the natural insects that will come in and eat those pests. And you're like gonna not bring in bees and pollinators. Like if you spray on your garden, like think about all the beneficial insects that won't want to hang out there to eat the bad ones. Like ladybugs eat a billion aphids and like a billion aphid eggs. But if you spray on your garden, like the ladybugs aren't gonna want to come hang out and kill those pests. So try to build like an ecosystem to invite the right bugs to then eat the bad bugs. Companion planting is going to be your best friend to protect against pests. And in my garden planner, I do have a tab on companion planting of what I plant together for protecting your plants, your garden against pests. And then also companion planting can help increase your yield of certain plants. Like for example, I like to plant green beans on trellises next to my tomatoes because green beans put nitrogen into the soil, which the tomatoes like totally eat up, and they need that as an essential nutrient. So other than companion planting, picking off pests manually, that's pretty much it for pest control. So 5 beds of tomatoes, and I will start all those seeds inside in April. They'll be planted out after my last frost, and I will take you through all of that in future videos. The next couple raised beds, which are gonna be 2 of the new ones that we're building, will be squash. I'm gonna do butternut squash for the first time this year. I actually tried technically last year. I put seeds directly into the ground where our compost pile used to be. The soil was like way too compact. The roots couldn't set, nothing happened, and it was a total fail. So I'm not really going to count last year because I didn't really try super hard in my main garden. So this year I'm dedicating an entire raised bed to butternut squash, an entire raised bed to acorn squash. Those beds will also be lined with bush beans, which are a green bean that is grown in a bush type. So I do green beans on trellises vertically, and those are pole beans because they grow like up a pole or up a trellis. This year I'm going to do, let me grab them, bush beans. They're going to grow like short, and beans, again, like I said with the tomatoes, they put nitrogen in the soil, and squash is going to eat up that nitrogen to be a healthier plant. So I'm really excited to grow these bush beans for the first time. Another raised bed is going to be tomatillos. I did 5 tomatillos, maybe 6 tomatillos in grow bags last year. They did good in the grow bags. I just want to bring them into like the main part of the garden this year. So I'm going to do 10 tomatillo plants in one 8x4 raised bed. And I'm going to line the outside with some really spicy peppers like cayennes, habaneros, and serranos to hopefully help with a little bit of pest control. The next raised bed is going to be my peppers. And if you saw any of my harvest videos or garden tours from last year, you'll know I went way overboard on the peppers. I think I had like 66 pepper plants. This year I'm doing 36 peppers. So cutting down pretty much about in half. This year I'm just going to do the ones surrounding tomatillos, like I said, and then I'll have 28 peppers in one 8x4 raised bed. I know that sounds like a lot. A lot of people had a lot to say last season when I packed in 28 peppers in one 8x4 bed. I had them spaced out 12 inches. I had 4 rows of 7. They did amazing together. They were so big and so strong and so productive. And because they were so close together, anytime we had like really heavy winds, the ones next to each other, they all supported each other and like held hands, and I didn't have to trellis them because they were so close and they supported each other. So I do 28 peppers in a raised bed, and it worked for me last year. I'm doing it again this year. And then my metal birdies raised bed this year is going to just be lavender for my bees, and then some herbs. I'm going to do oregano and parsley in that raised bed. A lot of the other herbs like dill, cilantro, and basil, those will just be lining my raised beds, which I'll get more into detail on this as I plant these, but just know in my birdie's bed will be lavender, oregano, parsley. I'm also gonna do snapdragons and grow bags around my birdie's bed. I did the snapdragons in the birdie's bed last year. I'm gonna move them out to the grow bags this year, and I think they're gonna be really pretty. I did the Orange Wonder from Botanical Interest last season. They were absolutely beautiful. Those seeds are already sold out, so I had to go and get some from Johnny Seeds, which I've never bought anything from Johnny Seeds, but they have great reviews, so I think it's going to be fine. And those will be started inside in February, and they actually get planted out pretty early. They get planted out around the same time as, actually the exact same time as the onion. So it's a nice like early flower to get in your garden and like brighten things up in the spring. On the topic of flowers, I'm doing a lot more flowers this year. I do some really pretty zinnia varieties this year. This one, I hope you can see, is like pink and beautiful. This one here is the Queeny Lime Red, and it looks like pink on the outside and like lime on the inside. So I'm really excited for these ones. And I'm actually going to put these in a lot of my raised beds, like around my tomatoes, I think, just to like add a colorful element throughout my garden. So I'm really excited to do more flowers this year. That is it for the raised beds. I'm realizing one thing I did forget to mention, those 2 raised beds in the beginning that get onions, when I harvest those in July and take those out, I will put carrot seeds down in their place and then get a nice harvest of carrots after my first frost in the fall. So that's it for the raised beds. The trellises that connect the raised beds, those just get all vining crops. Those get cantaloupe, pole beans, which are green beans, cucumbers. I'll be doing pickling cucumbers, slicing cucumbers, which are like English cucumbers, and I'm trying the Japanese cucumbers this year. That was a recommendation from my uncle, so we're gonna see how those go. And then I think that's it for trellises. Oh, and I'm doing loofah. I'm really excited. I am sick of seeing all the videos on Instagram and YouTube of people doing loofahs and not being able to be part of it. I have major FOMO with the loofahs. So I went ahead and ordered loofah seeds from Botanical Interest, and I'll be doing, I think 2 plants, probably 2 or 3 plants on one trellis. I got to do a little more research on that one in terms of spacing, but I am going to do loofah. I'm really excited. I want to make my own sponges this year. So that will be another new one for me. And then the grow bags, which I don't know if I touched on enough, my grow bags that are lining my fence, that's where I put all of my lettuce, my kale, and my spinach. That all gets planted out in the spring, and then I do succession planting throughout the year. So if I have like, for example, we'll say I have 9 grow bags, I will do like 1 with kale, 1 with spinach, 1 with lettuce, and then like 3 weeks later, I'll do another set of 3 in that same way. That way, by the time the first set is ready to harvest and then I eat through it, that next set is ready to then eat. And then I'll do that throughout the entire season. Sometimes those plants kind of like do poorly in the heat of the summer, which is why I like to grow them in grow bags, because I can move those grow bags to a shadier spot once the sun gets too hot and they try to bolt and go to seed. So they're super nice in grow bags. Also, a lot of people deal with slug damage on their greens, specifically lettuce and spinach. And I find that the grow bags, the slugs can't get to the lettuce because they just never grew up the sides of my grow bags. It's really, really nice going an entire season of lettuce without any pest damage, no slug damage at all. So that's why I use grow bags, and that's why I highly recommend them for your greens. Okay, that is overview of what I'm growing this year. Very excited about it. I can't wait to get started, but now I just want to take a little bit time here at the end for like a big recommendation on what I think you should do if you're a beginner gardener. I said it in the beginning of this video a little bit about, you know, starting with maybe 4 raised beds and a handful of grow bags or just grow bags. But first thing you need to do is figure out where in your yard or your property gets the most sun. Most of these summer crops that you're going to want to grow, like tomatoes and peppers and squash and zucchini, they need at least 8 hours of sun. So right now, just start looking at your property and figure out where you get the most sun. And then that is going to be where you're going to start your garden. Best case scenario will be southern exposure, so you can get that sun from east to west all day long, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Just a good area with a lot of sun is the way to go. And then, like I said, I think like 4 raised beds and a couple grow bags, really good way to start. I also recommend mixing, get some plants from a nursery and start some seeds yourself directly into your garden. I'm not saying you have to start seeds inside and transplant, but I think doing a few crops from seed directly into your garden is going to bring you so much joy and fulfillment, and it's going to be so rewarding seeing seeds germinate for the first time, and that is going to like really kickstart your love for gardening. Seeds I recommend doing that with that are really easy to germinate, they germinate fast, they germinate quick, are like snap peas, which I know I haven't mentioned in this video because I'm not growing them, but I did grow them my first year. They were a lot of fun. They're a nice early spring crop, and you can plant them before your last frost. So if you're like really eager to get going, that's like a great plant to do because they germinate fast, they grow easy. Mine had no issues with pests, and you get to like start enjoying and harvesting your snap peas sometimes earlier than you even plant out your summer crops. It's a great, great beginner crop. Also, spinach, lettuce, kale, all those germinate super well. They're another one like the snap peas that you can grow before your last frost. So it's an early one to like kind of get you in the gardening mood for the year, and they're super, super good. Having your own lettuce and spinach and kale, the taste, so different from a grocery store. Like I cannot even explain to you how much better it is. So those are my recommendations for beginner gardeners. If you have any extra questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can DM me on Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you can see all the other videos I put out this season on gardening. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like. It really does mean the world and helps out my channel a lot. If you can follow me on Instagram at More Than Gardening, on TikTok at More Than Gardening _. I will leave those in the description. There are a lot of imposters on TikTok acting like me right now, so I appreciate if you follow the correct one. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.